This is Wednesday's Women, hosted by Caitlin and Taylor. We invite you to join us in a candid conversation about the roles of women in political organizing and beyond as we celebrate the centennial celebration of the 19th Amendment. We hope that you find this episode educational, entertaining, and the women we discuss inspiring. If you like what you hear, subscribe and share. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wednesday's Women. This is a special episode as we are going to be celebrating a couple things. First thing we're going to celebrate is having a new editor. So Taylor and I are super busy and we never sleep. And so we've decided to expand our little Wednesday's Women family to include another member of our Clarion community, which is Jacob Wilcox. Jacob, would you please give everybody a little bit of a one-on-one on who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Jacob. I'm a part of Student Senate here at Clarion, and that's how I met Caitlin and Taylor. I'm a sophomore that's majoring in information systems, and I talked to Caitlin about it, and she said it would be a good resume builder thing, and it's just something I would enjoy doing to do the editing for you guys.
And another thing I think it's important to mention is Jacob's fellowship with, is it All In?
It is a Campus Vote project.
Campus Vote project. So another person who's interested to seeing everyone be civically engaged. So thank you, Jacob, for coming on and for agreeing to listen to us for a long time weekly.
Another great thing we're celebrating is a record turnout in the 2020 election. We had the most votes cast. That's a huge accomplishment. Obviously, I'm going to say like 0.01% of those votes cast were because of work that Clarion University has been doing. But it's still exciting just to see a record number of votes cast across the country. And that had some pretty big repercussions for women. So this is the most women we've ever seen elected to congressional seats, and this is the first woman to ever be elected to the vice presidency. So 2020 was a big year election-wise for women and many other minorities, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing we're looking to celebrate, which is directly correlates to where we're going with this podcast this evening and this month, is Native American Heritage Month. So November is Native American History Month, if you did not know that. And this month we have decided we want to take the time to celebrate rich and diverse cultures, traditions, histories, and to acknowledge the important contributions of Native people. Heritage Month is also super important because it's an opportune time to educate the general public about tribes, to raise a general awareness about the unique challenges Native people have faced both historically in the present and the ways in which they still, struggle today, and also the ways in which tribal citizens have worked to conquer these challenges and continue to work for these issues. I think that as Americans, we are very, naive would be one way to put it. We don't recognize that there were so many people here before, not Western, but like Europeans came. And that's something that my fiance is very interested in. He always says about the millions and millions of people that were here before Europeans came and how we don't teach that in American history, and we don't teach that in general U.S. history.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a shortcoming of the American education system. So we talk a lot on this podcast about how we sort of like male wash things, where we tell a lot of great men's histories, but not a lot of great women's histories. And I also think we tend to whitewash history quite a bit. So just in calling 1920 and 2020, obviously, as the centennial celebration of women's suffrage, a lot of people don't put in that little, I guess you could call it like an asterisk moment where you say not all women were given the right to vote in 1920. It's predominantly just white women. So I do think it's important to acknowledge not just white women's accomplishments, but all women.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, we've decided we're going to try to focus this month on some of these women who haven't had their stories told as frequently. So for today's episode, we are going to be talking about Sharice Davids. And I just realized this through our beginning little talk here, but this woman had some history, man. Like, she was neat. Again, another badass woman just trying to do her own thing. So Sharice Davids was born May 22nd, 1980 in West Germany. She was a member of the Ho-Chunk, which is the Winnebago people. I'm gonna have so many bad, like, pronunciation things this month. It's gonna be wild. She was also an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. She was raised by a single mother, and she attended Leavenworth High School. She later also attended Johnson County Community College and then the University of Missouri, Kansas City, where she graduated from the last with a bachelor's degree in business administration in 2007. So we're really like close to present day. You know, it's not like most of the women we've spoken of on our podcast who existed many years ago.
Yeah, shout out to that whole first season where no one was still alive when we discussed it.
We were just like, we don't know what they think, because there wasn't a lot of documentation, but we can make guesses.
And I really like that she went to a community college. Like, I don't want to talk down about community colleges, but I do think sometimes we talk about really influential women, and it's like she got her undergrad at Harvard, and then she went to Oxford for her grad. And so I think it's really great to show that Sharice Davids has accomplished a lot, which we'll talk about here in a minute, starting with a community college, because I do think they sometimes get a bad rap. And I think it's a completely fine decision to do all of your gen eds at a community college and then transition into a 4-year, or if you're just going for an associate's, get your associates from a community college. Like, I think those are completely valid.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say a lot of the teachers that I had in high school went to a community college, so for their bachelor's. So it's not something people should downplay with, like, how respectable it is to go and do something like that. It's just as respectable as going to, like, a 4-year state university or private university. So Sharice Davids earned her Juris Doctor from Cornell Law School in 2010. And it's also really nice to note that she was a professional MMA fighter in the 2010s. Her career officially began in 2013, and she maintained a record of 1-1. And she tried out for the Ultimate Fighter, but didn't make it. Which is kind of wild to me, because whenever I was first reading this, I didn't read it very quickly enough, and I was like, Taylor, MMA. Because I did not think it was going to be mixed martial arts, and I'm like, what does that mean to stand for? She's like, mixed martial arts, and I'm like, oh, so it is that kind of MMA. Okay.
So I do try to fact check everything we put in here and have, like, at least 2 sources for every statement. Obviously, some things, especially not typically for people like Sharice Davids, who's very recent and who you can just ask, but for people from, like, way back in the 1800s, sometimes there is some discrepancy. And when I first read on, like, her Wikipedia page that she was an MMA fighter, I'm like, no. Like, someone put this in here as a joke. And so, like, I looked it up, and she was, like, a pretty big name in her region. So she had an amateur career before her professional career. And she's, like, a big name in that. And I'm like, that's wild. No one's going to believe this. But there was a professor at Clarion University who was an MMA fighter.
Who?
His name was Spock. I forget what his first name was, but he wasn't a doctor. And he was an MMA fighter, and, like, my friend showed me a video of him, and it was so hard to focus in earth science, because I was like, I have so many questions for him.
So he was a biology, like, that field, like, sciences?
Yeah, I had him for basic earth science. I don't know what his, like, primary field was. Earth science was interesting, but I was more interested in, like, how did you get here? From a professional MMA career. Like, pay-per-view fights. Like, he was a big...
Oh, wow.
And then he was like, let me just teach at Clarion University. I'm like, how? I have so many questions. None of which are related to the tectonic plates. So, Sharice Davids attended Cornell University, like Caitlin said, for her law degree. She did maintain an impressive legal career. In 2010, she began her legal career at the Kansas City office of an international firm. She worked as a corporate transactional attorney, mainly focused on mergers and acquisitions for private equity clients. She also focused in economic development transactions with Native American tribes. So she was, still close to her roots and still working with Native American tribes. She left her corporate practice and moved to the Pine Ridge Reservation, where she took a position with a high school as the director of an economic development initiative. As part of this initiative, she developed an entrepreneurship curriculum that was implemented at the high school level, which is really great because I do think the sooner you reach kids, the better. So obviously, it's never too late to start an entrepreneurial idea. If you're in your 50s or your 60s, still go for it. But I definitely think it's a good idea to reach out to kids when they're still in high school and sort of still determining their future and just making sure they know what all of their options are.
Can we take a minute to talk about how hard entrepreneurship is as a word to say?
I despise whoever came up with that word.
It's just
there's so many vowels. It's such a long word. I had a class where we talked about it, an econ class where we talked about it all the time, and I still can't say it properly. I could probably spend the rest of my life trying to learn how to say it properly, and I won't. It will say on my headstone, could not pronounce entrepreneurship. I'll never get it. I'm sorry. I respect entrepreneurs.
Anemone.
I know how Nemo felt in that scene. As a person who is in a business college, I know how he felt. Davids later served as the deputy director of the Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation in Porcupine, which was a community on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. She managed a variety of day-to-day operations in this position. She also acted as an in-house legal counsel and laid the foundation for a social enterprise program. Can we appreciate how easy enterprise is to say compared to the other word that I'm not even going to attempt? Thank you. I know that they're not the same, definition, but, it could have been an easy word. We made them up. We could have made an easy one. So she did maintain an impressive legal career.
Something else that we wanted to talk about was her history as a White House Fellow. So, created in 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson, the White House Fellows Program was designed and this is quote, to give the fellows first-hand, high-level experience with the workings of the federal government and to increase their sense of participation in national affairs, end quote. So the fellowship was created as a nonpartisan program, and it has maintained that tradition throughout both Republican and Democratic administrations, which is really a good thing to see that it was able to go through in a nonpartisan fashion. The mission of White House Fellows Program is to encourage active citizenship and service to the nation. So throughout the year, fellows actively participate in an educational program that expands our knowledge of leadership, policymaking, and contemporary issues. Also, it's important to note that community service plays a vital role in the program, and the fellows take part in service projects throughout the year. The highly competitive selection process to become a White House Fellow is based on a record of professional accomplishments, their evidence of leadership skills, the potential for their further growth, and the commitment to service. So these individuals are selected, and then they spend a year working as a full-time paid fellow to the senior White House staff, cabinet secretaries, and other top-ranking government officials. In 2016, Sharice Davis served as a White House Fellow in the Department of Transportation. While there, she had the privilege of working on a number of key initiatives of then Secretary Anthony Fox. And she was only one of 16. So she was working personally with them. They were a small working group. And as part of the Fellows Program, she broadened her knowledge of leadership, policy formation, and current affairs.
I just think that's a great opportunity. Also, fun fact, when you get to college, you'll learn this. A fellowship means you get paid. An internship doesn't always mean you get paid.
Correct.
So she was getting paid for this. Because honestly, I think internships where you don't get paid are a joke. Experience although a worthy cause, since that's all Jacob is getting out of his editorial job. I just feel like, obviously, if you like work for a big company, like if you get into Apple and they're like, we'll give you an unpaid internship, it's a joke. They're gonna make you like clean out inboxes, be the gopher. Like, I just think unpaid internships,
especially with companies that are like that big, like if it's like the like a government office or anything where it's not on that big of a scale, like it's like you have the money, you could give someone minimum wage at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting in with a small firm, so if you get in with like a podcast that's two college kids sitting in their bedroom, or if you get in with like a local firm in your hometown and they can't afford to have like an actual like social media specialist, and so they let you do it for experience, I don't look at that in the same way I look at like the White House being like, come work with us for a year and we'll pay you nothing. Obviously, the White House did pay her. That's great. I think they should. I also think that's a great program she got in. Since it was so small and since she worked so closely, I think she had a lot of growth opportunities. Not that she wasn't impressive before, but I just think that's like a really big accomplishment. And it led her to her tenure on the U.S. House of Representatives. So she is the first openly LGBT Native American elected to Congress, and she is one of the first two women elected to Congress. So we will discuss the other woman later this month. They were elected the exact same year, so I'm going to say the same time, even though obviously races are called at different times. I'm just going to say they were elected at the same time. So, you may be wondering when Sharice Davids was elected. She ran in the 2018 election for Kansas's 3rd Congressional District. She defeated Democrat Brent Welder, who was endorsed by Bernie Sanders, with a margin of 37 to 34 in the August primary election. She then went on to defeat Republican Kevin Yoder in the November 6, 2018 general election.
Damn.
I love the last name Yoder because I'm from a small town with a lot of Amish, and that's what they're often referred to. And so when I hear Yoder, I immediately think of when I was a kid, they were called Yoder Toters, and it was like a van that had a lot of Amish people being transported for like groceries and stuff. So it always makes me laugh. And I read his name a lot while I was researching Sharice, so it brought a great laugh about.
I'm just excited because it's like she defeated 2 men, you know, and that's what.
It's not that I don't want to see men succeed, but I do sometimes appreciate seeing a woman defeat men in a primarily male-dominated field. There is like something gratifying about that, especially if she's more qualified. Like if she's just winning because she's a woman, like
no,
not a great feeling. But if she is definitively more qualified than the men, and based off of what I found from them, I believe she was. So like it's just a great feeling. Currently on the what?
Well, I was just gonna say with that's what makes me think of the newest Supreme Court justice, like getting into office with your gender being an entire platform of why you're getting put into that position.
Yeah. And I had that concern when Joe Biden was like, I commit to putting a woman in office as VP. Obviously, I'm thrilled we have a female VP, and I can finally look at someone in that office who looks similar to me, is also a woman. But I feel like it detracts when you say, I'm only going to elect such and such a person.
Yes.
Because then people immediately question, are they actually qualified for the job, or did they just have the right parts?
Exactly.
So I do think if you're elected to a position, you should be qualified. Obviously, Sharice Davids was. There's no question about that. She worked with international firms. She worked in the White House. I just do think that sometimes when people say we're absolutely putting a woman or a person of color or a member of the LGBT community.
Before they've even looked at candidates, like before they've even announced their picks, like for like potential candidates.
Yes, I think it can sometimes detract from what is good intention, but not necessarily good delivery. And impact is more important than intention, quite frankly.
Agree.
Currently, Sharice David, she did win her re-election. I looked it up. She still serves on Congress. She serves on the Committee of Small Business. She works with the Subcommittee of Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, and the Subcommittee on Innovation and Workforce Development, which makes sense based on her previous positions. She also serves on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure and is the Vice Chair of Aviation Subcommittee, as well as the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit, and the Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Buildings, and Emergency Management. Again, very reasonable committee choices based on her experience with the Department of Transportation in the White House. Caitlin and I had this discussion earlier. I love House of Cards, and it pains me to say that I love Kevin Spacey's character. I hate Kevin Spacey, and he's a garbage human, and when all of that came out, I did quit watching House of Cards. Like, I won't watch it anymore. But before those came out, I was like a diehard House of Cards fan. If you watched it, you know he's a whip in that. His character is a whip. In that show, Sharice David serves as the regional whip. If you're unfamiliar with whips, so if you weren't a diehard House of Cards fan, whips tend to focus on sort of lobbying efforts, so making sure your policy initiatives have support, going to members and saying, how are you likely to vote? So think of the people for the last 3 months that we've listened to say, this state's going to vote this way and this state's going to vote this way. That's sort of their job within Congress, so that the majority and the minority parties have an idea of how things are going to go. Obviously, things change. Pennsylvania flipped, Georgia flipped, and that was sort of unaccounted for. And those things happen in Congress as well, so you think a senator is going to vote one way, or a representative is going to vote one way, and then they vote another way. So obviously a whip's job is not foolproof, but it does just give you an idea. If you know that you're only going to have like 3 people support a policy, you're not going to put it forward because it's just a waste of time. You shouldn't put it forward. Sometimes they do, and I'm just like, you knew it wasn't going to go well. That's what she currently serves as. Representative Sherry Bustus, I think that's how you say her name. Sherry, if you're out there and I mispronounced it, I'm sorry. Who serves as the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, took note of David's fairly quickly, and said, and I quote, rating her toward the top of the freshman class in terms of doing things the right way. She's not a show-off, she's an athlete, and if you've known any high-level athletes, they're disciplined, they're methodical, and they nail all the fundamentals, end quote. So she holds an incredibly high, respectable reputation within her Congress, and she even has her own official haters fan club, because a day after taking office, a Republican PAC quickly ran an ad opposing her. I feel like you've really made it when you have haters. Like, that's how you know, like, you're all that and a bag of chips. When someone comes out and is like, we hate this person, you've done it. You're good. You're solid. And she has that. There are people who oppose her. There are people who oppose everyone in Congress. In all politics. What?
Does that mean Trump's made it?
Technically, yeah. I mean, I can recognize that even people I intensely dislike have made it.
Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, technically Caitlin Bennett's made it. Do I think they were deserving of making it, and do I think they brought actual talent forward? Not necessarily, and it's not just them who I feel like made it without bringing talent forward. I just feel like once you have a hater, you have made it, whether you brought something forward or whether you just showed up and someone was like, I don't like that person. Because to have a hater you have to be fairly well known.
She brings disgrace to the Caitlyn Club.
She does. I'm sorry. There have been some pretty crappy Taylors.
I can't think of any.
Zachary Taylor. Look it up. Look up your name and see who brings disgrace to your name. I feel like you're less likely to find someone who's disgraced you if you have like a really original name.
Like
if you're like
Absidy.
Yeah. No shame to Emma's. I think it's a beautiful name, but if your name is Emma, like you could probably find several like bad Emmas just because it's such a popular name. Statistically, one of them has to be a bad apple.
Like Sarah's.
Yeah.
Just because it's common.
Even though we know some great Sarahs, like there has to be one.
Sarah Zerfos, if you're listening, hi.
Hi. We're not talking about you or Sarah Custer. There's another great Sarah. Back to Sharice. I wonder if there are bad Sharices. Because it's not like an out there name, but it's not an Emma or a Sarah. It's like a... Let us know in the comments. Do you know a bad Sharice? Yes. And if you say Sharice Davids, we're not friends. I'm not a hater. You haven't necessarily made it. We're just not friends. So, in June 2019, to mark the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, if you're unfamiliar with Stonewall riots, they were an event that took place, I believe, in New York.
Correct.
At the Stonewall Inn.
Correct.
They were, by all definitions, a riot, though I don't necessarily think they were an undeserved riot. So LGBT community members were facing a lot of discrimination from police and from legality and just all sorts of things. And there eventually became an issue where police would just raid what were seen as like gay clubs or lesbian bars. And so they would do things to intimidate these people. And so outside of the Stonewall Inn, rocks were thrown at police. People on both sides were injured and killed. It is a huge event and moment and sense of pride for LGBT members. It's when people see it as really being... I don't want to say aggressive. There's like a better word for it. Like persistent in receiving our rights. I feel like when you say aggressive, it's a negative connotation, and I don't think that there's anything negative about saying you have to recognize us as human beings and offer us basic human decency. It's not hard to not raid places where we feel comfortable being. And like basically the no human is illegal movement. So it's a huge event, and it is very important to pride and to LGBT, all of those things. And so Queer Tea, which is just an LGBT group named Sharice Davids, one of the Pride 50's trailblazing individuals who actively ensure society remains moving towards equality, acceptance, and dignity for all queer people, which is what the motivation for Stonewall was. So that is a huge honor. And again, she is the first openly LGBT Native American elected to U.S. Congress. So it is just a huge honor, and it's something she definitely deserves. She did serve this year as the vice chair of the 2020 Democratic National Convention. I think that's great. I think props to her, because it was definitely, as someone who has attended virtual events for a college and has helped put on virtual events for a college.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's no easy feat, and I was really impressed. There were definitely some moments where I was like, I miss like the older DNCs where like everyone's in the room, but there were other moments that I really liked, like when all the states were in their home state. Like, I think we should continue that. Like, we know you can do it now. That was a great moment.
Mm-hmm.
So Sharice is really climbing the political ladder, and I, for one, am thrilled to see it.
How old is she now? She was born.
Time for Taylor's favorite activity, which is math. This is actually really easy.
She's 40, right? She was born in 1980.
Yeah, so she's 40. Yeah, my dad was born in 1980, so I was like, this is actually a really easy math problem. So yeah, she's only 40 years old. Which, like, again, I don't think age necessarily equals wisdom. I've seen really smart young people and really dumb old people, and I've seen really smart old people and really dumb young people. So I don't think age plays a factor necessarily. But I do think it's always impressive when you see a younger person accomplish a lot.
Yes.
What is your opinions on Native American Heritage Month?
Okay, so as uncultured swine that I am, I feel like I didn't know it was even a thing until this year, and that's 22 years on the planet that I didn't know it, so that makes me believe that a lot of Americans don't know it, and that's really frustrating, because it's just like, we've encroached upon their land. Like, we stole. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Like, I'm very upset about it all still, because, like, we have done a bad.
We've done several bads.
Yeah, and I'm like, you go through all of high school, and we're almost done with college, and, like, how do you do that? How do we go through, like, this entire thing, you know?
Again, I am not disappointed in teachers or educators. Sometimes I feel like when I say I'm disappointed in the American education system, it comes off as like, teachers, you're not doing enough.
No.
I don't feel that way. I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on standardized tests, which don't focus a whole lot on history. And obviously math is not a bad skill to have. I have basic understanding of math. You can ask Caitlin. Tips make me panic. I'm not good at that. I consider myself to be a fairly intelligent individual. I've gotten pretty far. I did well on my standardized tests, but I also feel like I did a lot of learning on my own. And I feel about Native American Heritage Month the same way I feel about Constitution Day, in that absolutely, yes, we need to be celebrating Native American heritage, and we need to be educating people who are not familiar with their heritage about it. We need to be open to them, and we need to admit that while I technically never did any wrong to a Native American, I benefited from a system that did. So I benefit from a system that promotes white people, that says that we did not steal their land when we continued to steal land until like the 1980s. So I benefited from that system, even though I did not go out and, actively kick someone out of their house. It is something that I do feel bad for, and I do think it's important to teach people, this is what happened. Thanksgiving wasn't the Pilgrims sitting down with the Native Americans and sharing this big meal. I also think it's important. I didn't know that, Indian wasn't a good term until I was, 20 years old. And part of that is on me. I should have looked into it. I should have broadened.
We live in PA, though, and I feel like that's a common issue with our state.
Everyone around me said Indian, and, what was the worst thing I've ever heard was I once heard someone say, are they a casino Indian or a gas station Indian? Which means, are they Native American, or are they actually, from India? And I feel like that should have been a red flag for me, and it just never was. And I was significantly older when I learned that, they should be referred to as Native Americans and not Indians, and so I have corrected myself. And I think this month is a great opportunity to correct others and say, hey, we need to listen to them on what their current struggles are and how we can help them. But again, I feel like when you have a national holiday, it creates an excuse where you only pay attention to it for that length of time. So we really focus on Constitution Day on Constitution Day.
And then we forget.
And then we don't talk about it. And Native American Heritage Month, we make the little Indian hats in school that we shouldn't be making because we're not tribal and we don't have those practices. But there's this really whitewashed focus on Native American heritage for the month of November, and then it's not addressed. And I feel like national months should not be necessary to get you to care for other people or for concerns. Obviously, fun days like National Banana Split Day are fun, but you should not view National Banana Split Day and National Native American Heritage Month on the same platform of like, we focus on this one thing for this one set amount of time, and then we don't worry about it. And it happens with everything, with National Women's Month, National African American History Month. I feel like it's pretty common, and so I think they're really important. I think we should recognize the contributions that people of color and Native Americans have made, but I don't think you should use Native American Heritage Month to only focus on Native American heritage for 30 days and then say I'm not worried about it.
Agree.
Those are my thoughts on national months.
Okay, so what are your guys' thoughts on Native American women not holding office until 2018?
Bullshit. I give it 0 thumbs up because we have how many? Like, think about it. They were here before we had it. Their lineage and their history is older than ours, than America's. They should have been there this entire time. Same with women, you know what I mean? Like, how can you have a country that is... How do you have a group to represent you when you don't have someone to represent you?
Yes, I think obviously Native American women have existed long before 2018. They should have had representation long before 2018. I think the only time it would be acceptable to have a first in Congress or in the White House is if it's the first time that thing has been created. So if in 2052 we find a way to clone individuals, and so in 2079 we see the first cloned individual in Congress, I think that's fine, because that's the first time that opportunity was available. I don't think we're cloning people. That was just like, I hate the like purple person analogy. I just hate that analogy, so I refuse to use it. So, like, I'm not saying we're going to have clones in office. I'm just saying, like, that's the only time it's acceptable to, like, have a first in the 21st century. Like, everyone else has existed for a long time and should have seen themselves in their representative body.
The police disagree with you because I can hear them coming.
They do. The fire department in Pulaski, Pennsylvania has been in all kinds of hot water.
That people just, like, shooting fireworks off, they're just having a time of it.
Oh no, it was like a big Facebook drama. The like town supervisor like trash talked all of Pulaski because they didn't go to a firefighter spaghetti dinner. It was like a big deal. That's probably not even Pulaski's fire department. It's probably West Middlesex. Small towns are great, let me tell you. Everyone's like, why do you want to move to New York City? Like, well, if you had grown up in Pulaski, you would understand. So yeah, boo on no Native American women until 2018. I'm glad that there are now representation in Congress, though.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, what do you guys think lie in Ms. David's future?
She's only 40, so I feel like there has to be more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or if not more, I feel like she would at least maintain her work, because I don't know what else is going on in her life. But, like...
Yeah, that is one thing. We don't really delve into their personal lives too much. We pretty much focus on their political career. We learned from our second episode that 2-hour-long podcasts are not the move. So we don't go super in depth to like private projects they're working on.
I will say that podcast, that episode, has the most views of any of our other podcast episodes.
It is, and like when I go in to edit our audio and I see that it's at like 50 some views, I'm like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I'm so sorry you listened to us talk for 2 hours. Because we talked for 2 hours, and then it was either you or I who listened to us talk for 2 hours so we could edit it.
I think it was me at that point.
I think it was you. So yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we have learned we do not run 2-hour specials anymore. I'm gonna say president. I was very doubtful, honestly, that I would even see a female president in my lifetime. Which was always something hard for me to admit when they'd be like, when do you think we'll have the first female president? And I'm like, I guess hopefully in like what would be my grandchildren's generation, because like I don't foresee me seeing one. Now that we've seen a female vice president, Sharice Davids, she's 40. Yeah, she's 40, and I think it's 35 to be president. So Sharice Davids, 2024. Let's go.
Okay, like, sure. But also, I'm not gonna lie, like, go her if she goes for that, but like AOC 2024, like.
I forgot AOC was eligible in 2024. Again, I'm bad at math. I was thinking she was eligible 2028.
I just need someone young. I need someone young.
Yeah. How old would Sharice be? Oh, she'd only be 44.
Yeah. So young. Also young.
I can't. Yeah, I'd like to see her as president. Every woman we discuss from now on who's still alive, I'm gonna be like, go for president 2024.
Let's just make an entire ballot, Republican, Democrat, third party, just an entire ballot of women.
Yes. I want there to be like 50 people in the Democrat and Republican primary, and I want them to all be women.
And one man each.
I don't even want a man each. I don't even want to run the risk that a man would win. I want all women, and when men cry about it, I'd be like, I'm sorry, maybe next year.
So this is going to be like our final thoughts for the day. And Jacob, I would like you to join us for our final thoughts because I want to hear what a man's perspective of this is. So now that Kamala Harris is won, what do we call her husband?
Second husband. Oh, because it's lady, it's not wife.
Yeah. It's first lady, second lady.
What is the male of lady? The guy, lady.
Sir? Guy?
Man. Is it Lord?
I'm just going to say first man because that was also a movie that came out, I think, last year about the moon landing. So I like that.
Second man?
Yeah.
I think it's Lord. I think it's lady and lord. I think that's the counterparts.
That's the other thing. Like if we're
you hear lady a lot more than lord in today's culture. I wonder why.
Because lady is a lot more what's the word? Oh yeah, demeaning.
I just figured it was like Christians didn't want us calling other people lords.
There is only one lord.
In England there were like 40 at one time. Yeah, I would say first or second man.
Interesting.
Do we have to, like, well, yeah, I guess we do. I guess there have been some impressive first ladies and second ladies who have been acknowledged.
Yeah.
But there is always history happening, because we talked about this with Geraldine Ferraro. That's when they started using Ms. instead of Miss or Mrs.
Right.
So, what's his name? We can just call him Bob. What do we call Dr. Bob? Like, university-wise?
Dr. Bob?
Oh.
That's what I call him. I've never heard, actually. Dr. Dale did tell me a really funny story, and she might have told us this on the podcast. Whenever she first got the presidency, people thought he was Dr. Dale. Yeah. So they would come up to him and be like, hey, good job. And he's like, no, it's not me.
I am going to give them a slightly larger pass, though, on that, because Dale is predominantly seen as a male's name.
His name is Douglas, also. So we could call him
Doug.
We'll call him Dougie Jones.
Wasn't there a song? Yeah, like Dougie was a dance. I swear it was a song. Jacob's nodding. I feel like he...
I think I'd have to look.
I feel like Dougie was a dance.
Well, this is going to be a new part of our podcast, by the way. I've decided it's going to be it's like Jerry's final thought on Jerry Springer, except it's not that at all. It's Caitlin Taylor Jacobs' final thoughts. TKJ.
TKJ.
Jacob.
I'm currently looking at a YouTube video titled "How to Dougie Hip Hop Dance."
So it is a dance.
Teach me how to Dougie. Teach me how to Dougie. Everybody Hey.
See, it is a thing. I mean, do we really need titles though? Does it really need to be first lady and second lady?
No. It should just be the husband or the wife or the spouse or the partner. Yeah, because what are we gonna do?
Yeah, that was a big thing when Pete Buttigieg ran. And everyone was like, well, what do you call him if it's a guy and a guy? Like, oh, you call them partners or spouses. Or you could call them mates, but I don't like I understand in other regions, mate has like a different connotation, but here I'm not a fan of mates.
No.
I would prefer spouse or partner. So maybe it could just be first partner, second partner.
Pete Buttigieg was gay?
Yeah.
Yes. He had a husband who was a teacher. A teacher?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I had no idea. That's actually cool because I did the I Side With earlier this year, and he was the one that I most closely aligned before everyone started dropping out.
I started dropping out so they could align with Joe Biden to get rid of Bernie.
I liked Pete.
I liked Bernie.
I think Pete genuinely dropped out because he knew he didn't really have a shot. Unfortunately, America's not ready for the first gay president.
But this has been our final thoughts, and I want to thank everybody for listening to us about Native American History Month and about Sherry Davids, who we talking about next week. And when I say next week,
we are discussing. We mean recording right after this because someone fell behind. We are going to be discussing Winona LaDuke, a huge, famous Native American activist who has worked with several activism projects and has protested the pipeline. Always protest the pipeline.
Pipeline is crap. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and make sure you turn in next week.
This has been Wednesday's Women, sponsored by the Clarion University CU Engaged Coalition. The thoughts and ideas presented in this podcast are meant to be for entertainment purposes first and foremost, and we do not claim to be experts in any field. As always, thanks for listening, and make sure you go out and register to vote.